This is a very effective attack on hatred and prejudice and intolerance, and specifically gay bashing. When will it be time to attack the core issue, which is the assertion that homosexuality is morally wrong? When will it be time to say that that idea is itself intellectually indefensible and morally depraved?
Who would like to go first on that?
Do you want a date?
I mean, I think right now would be the time, but I also think that, I mean, I would say that the Laramie Project is an attack on hate, but it's also a reflection of a community. And the work that we do in Tectonic is usually to kind of go into the community and listen to the people's stories and then bring back what we've heard to the audience. So, I mean, for example, I think one of the most incredible speeches in the play, in the second act, is Sherry Johnson, who talks about, a hate crime is a hate crime. If you murder somebody, you hate them. I mean, what's the difference if you're gay or a prostitute or whatever? I mean, this is her belief system, and this is what she thinks. So, I mean, I think that people are going to hear that, and they're going to respond to it the way that they respond to it. It's just something that we're reflecting back to the audience. So, I mean, I do feel to a certain degree that the Laramie Project, and also the Laramie Project 10 years later, is kind of an attack on that position to a certain degree. I don't think it's a direct assault, but I do think that, there's enough material in the play that encourages discussion around these issues. And another thing that we do, Kelly and I have been on the road with the show, and we go and we talk to student groups, and this is a lot of what we talk about. I mean, it was very interesting. I was at the University of Pennsylvania in State College, and I asked this sexuality class. It's a gen ed class, so it was a very kind of general population, not the typical like theater goers who are all gung ho. And I said, how many of you are comfortable and okay with people being gay? And every single person in the class raised their hand. And then I said, and how many gay people in this class would be willing to come out right now? And nobody raised their hand, right? And it sparked a very lively conversation. And some of the people in the class were had very strong feelings about homosexuality. And I think that, it's about starting the dialogue and then finding your way in. For me, that's just my particular interest in style. I don't think it's necessarily about a full frontal attack for me, but I encourage people who have that style to do it.
I think that it's always a good time to attack hatred. But the way that you do that is not always necessarily by attacking an individual's beliefs. I think that one thing that I thought of when you were asking your question was the work of the Family Acceptance Project in San Francisco, which is focused on working with parents of LGBT youth to reduce their rejecting behavior and increase their accepting behavior. Basically to work with them to make them better parents for their LGBT youth. And one of the things that makes that project so effective and the curriculum so effective is that their approach is not attacking the belief system of the parent, because some parents believe that being gay is wrong. And what their child who is gay needs, I think ultimately the child would benefit from having a parent without that belief, but they need the parent that they have to treat them in a way that nurtures them. And so the Family Acceptance Project focuses on looking at behavior. And here are things that parents can do that, not so much what they believe, but here's steps they can take to protect their child, to reduce their child's likelihood of attempting suicide or of engaging in substance abuse. And it's a really different take, because very often when the LGBT community is looking at LGBT youth issues, we sort of, you have a very visceral reaction when you hear a parent say something like, I love my child even though they're gay, which doesn't really feel very accepting for most LGBT people, but is much, of course not, but it's a lot better than having a parent say, I don't love my child because they're gay. And so working with people and understanding that their belief system, which we might find really troubling, might be something that they need to hold on to for now to stay safe, but there's still a way that we can move in the right direction together.
I found the It Gets Better campaign very frustrating because, correct me if I'm wrong, as a writer, it's literally passive voice. And that instead of telling LGBT youth, it gets better someday if you hang on, why aren't we saying, let's make it better right now? You had mentioned to me a campaign, I think, called Just So We're Clear, which I've not been familiar with, that you preferred to the It Gets Better campaign. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that campaign and why you prefer it.
And the campaign is much more along the lines of your strategy, and it's going to be Just to Be Clear. And it's going to be about, just to be clear, every time you talk about the sanctity of marriage, you're encouraging gay teenagers to commit suicide. Just to be clear, every time that somebody at a church says, love the sinner, hate the sin, you're encouraging a teenager to kill himself. Just to be clear, every time that kind of dialogue and discourse occurs, you're responsible for somebody in that community, killing themselves. And see if that works.
Do you see tolerance as a baseline or a victory for a community, or do you see it as just another form of the live and let live mindset?
I just want to answer one thing about that. There's this great line of Father Rogers. We all love Father Roger. And, when we were interviewing him, he was talking about tolerance. And he was like, now, how would you like it if I said, you know what, come on into our church. We're going to tolerate you. I thought that made it pretty clear, But, tolerance is better than hatred, right? So, it is about progress.
Continue the message of teaching those about intolerance, because intolerance is formed from ignorance. What would you say to those that don't really have the resources that Tectonics has, that want to continue that message in our own way?
I feel like I'm being a mic hog, but Tectonic didn't always have these resources either, and I think the thing is...
Still doesn't.
Yeah, we still don't. So I think the thing to do is to focus on what you're passionate about and find a way to make the work. And it's hard. It's a very, I don't know what, if you're in the arts or you're in the arts. Okay, so that's hard. I don't think that America quite appreciates the arts like maybe sports, say. And it's hard to find funding, it's hard to do all these things, but it's a worthwhile endeavor. And, the thing is if you actually pursue this work and, also pursue your craft and try to make more skillful and better versions of the work that you're making, you'll get by, you'll find your way, and you may be fortunate enough to, have something like the Laramie Project in your company that really put us on the map. Well, Gross Indecency did, but it's just something you have to keep pushing for.
I also think that it can help to focus on smaller stages, and that you don't have to end up putting your play on for 400 people for it to be a successful, carrying of a message. That living room, many theatrical movements have started in people's living rooms, quite literally. So,
Ours.
His.
Have you ever done performances of the Laramie Project to a hostile audience? Have you had hostile experiences in communities where you've tried to do it?
Well, I think that in every community there have always been, it generates a conversation, and sometimes that conversation is not the most pleasant conversation. What usually happens is that when it happens at high schools or at universities, the heads of the university or the high school try to block the students from doing the Laramie Project. And that has happened quite a bit. And when they succeed, it's a terrible thing. When they fail, it's a magnificent thing, because the actors become no longer actors, but become real social commentators. And they understood that what they wanted to say was so powerful that the community felt that they had to be silenced. So all of a sudden, you have artists that really understand the power of the medium.
to say it correctly, but Tectonic got a grant from the Arcus Foundation, essentially for us, because we were getting, Tectonic offices were getting so many calls, from young people in high schools in particular, who wanted to do the work, who were doing the work and getting shut down. And Lee Fondakowski and I, who was one of the directors too on this project and was the head writer of the Laramie Project, she and I went out to Santa Monica, California, of all places, where there was a Santa Monica high school. There were 5 young women there who wanted to put on the Laramie Project. Their principal gave them the go-ahead to do that, and then at the last minute pulled it because he didn't think the community could handle it, couldn't handle, quote unquote, the issues that the play raised. There were 2 openly lesbian women, and the other 3 young women in this who wanted to do this were all straight. They ended up calling us. We went out there. They were working at the high school. They had made a call to the LA Times. They got some reporters on the story. They ended up getting, we ended up helping them kind of stage their play to the best of our ability and talking to them about these issues. And really, I was so inspired by these young women because I didn't come out until I was 24. So I can't even imagine, having the wherewithal, having that kind of bravery or courage when you're that young. But they got a big story out of this, and they ended up getting a professional theater that volunteered a space for them to actually put on the Laramie Project. So, and the principal there ended up saying, yes, we'll do this, and the next year we'll do this, and please come back. And so it ended up being a really amazing thing, and is one of the wonderful things that I think a lot of us have gotten to be witness to, that kind of courage and that kind of change. What did we call them?
And they nicknamed them the Power Lesbians.
We had 5 young men from Fairfax County, Muslim kids, go to Pakistan and become terrorists. So it's a two-way street. I would challenge you all to address that issue. What are these kids, what are these Muslim kids being taught, and how do you address that? It's a two-way street. Maybe there's hatred coming the other way.
Well, you may recall when the pastor down in Florida was going to go up to New York regarding the issue of the construction of the community center that also included a mosque a few blocks from Ground Zero. And General Perez and others talked about how these issues of burning Korans are absolute breeding grounds for cells overseas and send a message at home. And there's undeniably been an increase in homegrown terrorism. And so is the intolerance a cause of it? Well, that's a very complex question. But is the need to educate everyone in America about the fact that there are people buried in Arlington Cemetery who made the ultimate sacrifice for this country, who are Muslim Americans? That is absolutely the case. One of them was honored this past Monday at the Kennedy Center, a young man from New Jersey, when the ADL had their concert against hate. And so we need to continue our efforts. And that's why, while I have profound and always will have profound respect for the First Amendment, when I hear some of the things that people say, especially elected officials and other people in leadership positions, Islam is a cult, that doesn't help. That doesn't help at all. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that we are educating people about the fact that our diversity is our greatest strength as a nation. And our Muslim brothers and sisters are doing so much good in our country. And yet, the notion that we had to file a brief in Murfreesboro that Islam is in fact a religion. There are billions of people who are being duped, apparently, across the world into thinking that Islam is a religion, according to the people who are making that argument in Murfreesboro. And so we have a lot of work to do. And the consequence of failure in that mission can have absolute real impact right in our backyard.
Actually, I was just looking at the clock, and I realized we are at the end of our time. I actually, before I dismiss everybody, I wanted to hijack the mic for just a second. I think given the topics that we're talking about and what we're seeing on stage tonight, it's very important for everyone to remember that today is the National Transgender Day of Remembrance. This is the day to remember the victims of violence, the people who have been murdered, simply for trying to live their lives honestly as who they are. So if everybody can keep those people in mind, keep that event in mind tonight, hopefully it'll go a long way for us all to learn a little bit more about how we treat each other. Thank you all for being a part of the panel. Thank you all for joining us.